Welcome, everyone. I am so excited. We're getting to the end of the week. Okay, we've got two more podcasts for me. So we get an hour to spend with this excellent man down here. I'm going to introduce him. His name is Howard Bloom. This is about the seventh time or so we've talked. He just wrote a new book, The Case of the Sexual Cosmos. Everything you know about nature is wrong. Now I'm going to hand off to Jason for a second because Jason started reading this book. I know Howard from Michael Jackson stories and all these other things. So I'm going to hand off to Jason, then we'll talk to Howard. We're so excited to have you. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Jason. So,
It's
Jason,
my.
what have you pulled out of this book so far?
I gotta say, already, I really love the framing and I love the way it's written. But you talk about the idea that people are too anti-life in their environmental protection. They're that kind of mindset, right? So that's something that always kind of bothered me. Is that I want to preserve the environment. I don't want the earth to catch on fire. I don't want all of humanity to suddenly die. But the people that are really into this environmentalism type stuff tend to be anti-human. And you frame it in a way that's completely opposite of that, which I think is great. So maybe that's a good place for you to just tell us a little bit, about the premise of the book here.
Well, the traditional environmentalist community, especially the environmentalist extremists, first of all, we owe a great deal to environmentalism. It has spotted the necessity of keeping environments alive. It has pinpointed the man-made carbon produced global warming, and a whole bunch of other stuff that have been extremely valuable. I'll just tell you one story about how it's been valuable. When I first came to New York in 1964 from my hometown of Buffalo, New York, I wanted to wear all white outfits, white pants, white shirts, and I was going to NYU. And I noticed that by noon, my white outfits were no longer white. There were horizontal creases that I had never noticed before, and every single one of them was filled with a black grit. So my shirt and pants were slowly turning gray. And the problem was that about 3/4 of a mile from NYU, there was this massive 50-story high set of chimneys for Con Edison, the electricity provider in New York City. Massive. And they were belching coal smoke. So that coal smoke's detritus was settling on the creases of my shirt. Then came, of all people, Richard Nixon, and established the Environmental Protection Administration, and the air was cleaned up in New York City. It was cleaned up in L.A., where L.A. was famous back in those days for its smog, and it was even cleaned up in London, which obviously had nothing directly to do with the EPA. But in London, up to 2,000 people would die when they would have these infestations of smog, when the whole city would just be covered in smog. So environmentalism has pulled a lot of good things like that. It has cleaned up our drinking water, all kinds of stuff. And there's no doubt that carbon dioxide is a cause of global warming. But the trick is, and what the environmentalists get wrong, I mean, for example, the big triumph over the last few weeks has been to remove all the dams on the Klamath River in the Pacific Northwest so that salmon can spawn there once again. But those dams were doing something. Now, the real trick is this. Is evolution nature? Of course. The nature of evolution is to evolve. What does that mean? That means change. That means catastrophic change. 99.9% of all the species who have ever lived on life are dead. They're gone. They're extinct. Who killed them? This all happened before tailpipes and smokestacks were even invented. They were killed by nature. Once upon a time, about 3 billion years ago, the species existing at the time, our foremothers, were bacteria. And some of those bacteria rebelled against the status quo, you could say, and invented a radically new technology. And that new technology grabbed squiggles, mere squiggles, from the sky, coming down from the sky, and employed them as pistons in the powerhouse of life. That process was green photosynthesis. And so all of us are built so that we take in the things that will be helpful to us, and we excrete the stuff that's poisonous to us. And the bacteria started excreting, and they excreted what was poisonous to them from the photosynthetic process. The bacterial farts at first seemed utterly harmless. I mean, who could complain about it? But bacteria is so small you can't see it. An entire bacterial colony of 7 trillion is so thin that if it were on your palm, you couldn't see it. And those bacterial farts from entire colonies were so small. How could they even count? And over the course of 1 billion years, those little farts built up. And finally, they caused a mass die-off. And it looked like all of life could be killed because those little farts were toxic. They were poisonous. They were poisonous to life. And then some bacteria came up with this wild biological equivalent of an idea. And there were tiny little bacteria that could actually digest this poison. So big bacteria invited in tiny bacteria and basically said this, if they could have said anything, which they couldn't. But this is, again, the translation from biology to talk. And they basically said, look, I'll create a paradise for you inside of me. I'll give you everything you ever wanted in life. I'll give you everything you need to survive. Plus, I will protect you and defend you. All you have to do is take that toxic stuff in the atmosphere, that poisonous environment, that polluted environment, and turn it into energy that I can use. And the deal worked out. Thus was born what we call eukaryotic life. And eukaryotic life gave birth to the 3 of us sitting in this room right now. Now, what's the point? There was a toxic polluting of the environment, a toxic polluting of the atmosphere. It was massive. It was dangerous. Who did it? There were no humans around. There were no tailpipes and smokestacks. That was nature. And nature has this great tendency, evolution has this great tendency to find a poison or a problem and turn it into a piston, turn it into part of the powerhouse of life. So life is not gentle and passive and kind. It does not settle into harmonies. A harmonious nature is not nature's nature at all. In fact, if all were harmony, how in the world could you account for something that is viciously natural? Death. And death is universal. So
it's like there's like evolution as even the Earth has a natural correcting ability.
Right.
But we see it naturally biologically. An expression like all of a sudden a number of females would explode because the population knows it needs it, right? We see this happen throughout all of history and time.
Right. So basically we are given this vision. We're given an unstated assumption, especially in extremist environmentalism, that this Earth without humans are a cancer, right? And humans have caused everything bad that's ever happened. And if they could, they'd blame that initial oxygen pollution, the great oxygen catastrophe, on humans too. But they haven't figured out a way. And they don't know their history of life that well. But one way or the other, if only humans would remove the scars and wounds with which they have inflicted on nature, nature will become generous, kind, and harmonious, and the world will become a petting zoo. Sorry, the world has never been a petting zoo. All of those pictures you see on television, those films of lions bringing down gazelles, and the gazelles looking panicked and being alive and still seeing the world around them while their guts are being torn out by lions. Is that an invention of Walt Disney when he started shooting these things in the 1950s? Not at all. Not one bit. All of us are born to eat other living things, whether they're even a vegetarian, eats plants. Those are other living beings. And it's a nature that inflicts that system on all of us is not the loving, kind nature of a petting zoo, not at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, nature's definitely cruel, and humans have been able to adapt. And as the only ones who actually are able to change their environment to the level they do, we can also create the devastation that nature has laid upon us in a way, right?
Well, also, there's a closet Marxism underlying an awful lot of this environmentalism.
100%.
And capitalism happens to be the greatest engine of human creativity ever. And what is this cosmos really all about for the past 17.3 billion years or 16.33 billion years? It's been all about creativity. It's been all about creating shape shock. It's been all about creating material miracles, astonishing supersized surprises. And right now, we are nature's latest tool for the creation of supersized surprises and shape shocks. And that is nature. That is what evolution cherishes, these giant leaps forward. So that is part of the spirit of the book, that nature is not passive at all. Nature is rebellious. Evolution is about rebellion. Evolution is about turning poisons into possibilities, turning horrors into opportunities. And nature is obstreperous. Nature is rebellious. And one phrase from the book is, nature loves those who oppose her most. So does that sound
I really like how you put it in the book. You say that is nature's mandate. Reinvent me, upgrade me, give me new powers, haul me from the present and the past into the landscape of the impossible, pole jump me into the future. So I really like that, the way that's put. Looking into the future, do you think we're going in a good direction as far as upgrading the planet?
First of all, the modern capitalist Western system that many intellectuals loathe and despise, that is the only system in the world that has ever brought us the concept of ecology.
And I would argue, Howard, if untouched, if left to nature and evolution, it is also a self-correcting organism.
It's a self-correcting organism, and even more than that, nature loves acquiring new powers. And we act as if we have contributed nothing to this cosmos. We have simply strip mined the earth. That is utterly false. We have created so many new powers on behalf of evolution and
art,
nature. Yeah.
Creativity, just the thoughts, right?
And it stuns you, it astonishes you. And one of those powers comes from being able to see the role of greenhouse gases in the environment. Now, this book recommends not that we try to turn back the clock to 1650 before the Industrial Revolution, or 1850 before the Industrial Revolution from the point of view of climate, but that we started inventing what I call climate stabilization technologies about more than 300,000 years ago. 300,000 years ago, we ripped the first coat off of a bear and turned it into a fur coat for a human. That's an attempt at a climate stabilization technology. 17,000 years ago, we took mammoth tusks and mammoth ribs, put them together in a giant framework, and threw mammoth pelts, mammoth skins over them. We created tents big enough for 17 families. That was a climate stabilization technology. Attempting to diminish the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in order to stop anthropogenic global warming, human-caused global warming, that's a stab at a climate stabilization technology. But let's recognize that the path of climate is in a state of perpetual change. When this planet was first born, it was the home of all climate catastrophe. It swiveled around its axis every 6 hours. So for 3 hours, you'd have this toxic stuff called light, radiation. And for 3 hours, you'd have this equally toxic stuff called darkness. And the temperature would go up and down 88 degrees every 3 hours. Meanwhile, the planet was tilted on its axis so that it had 4 massive climate changes a year. We call them summer, winter, fall, and spring and take them for granted. No, I'm sorry. Those are massive climate changes. It had another perturbation in its orbit that caused massive climate changes every 44,000 and 100,000 years. That's called the Milankovitch cycles. In other words, this was a poison pill of stone. This was the home of all climate disasters. And life, by being extraordinarily rebellious, extraordinarily extreporous, extraordinarily willing to do the absolutely impossible, to do things that, according to probability theory, could never happen at all. And yet life insisted on doing those things. And over the course of the last 4 billion years, we have greened, all us life forms, have greened and gardened a poisonous pill of a planet, the home of all climate disasters and climate catastrophes. So the result has been the climate still goes radically up. It was so hot about 55 million years ago that there were dinosaurs at the South Pole and tropical plants. There was no ice cover at the South Pole at all. And then the climate went into a massive dive, and this is what it does all the time. It's called the icehouse greenhouse effect. It went into a massive dive, and we had ice ages. And glaciers were scraping their way across North America and changing the landscape. Now, note this, changing the landscape. Who was doing this? Was this humans with bulldozers? No, it was nature with glaciers. And then the climate warmed again approximately 11,000 years ago, and then dipped into another tiny little ice age and dipped back up again and made the climate that we know today.
But Howard, if I may jump in just 1 second on that. I'm not familiar. Obviously, I know you're on Coast to Coast, but we have people like Fingerprints of the Gods with, I can't even think of his name right now, but he talks about the Great Deluge, where Earth went through, where it was bombarded and had the Great Flood, right? Are you familiar with that?
No,
with that analogy as well, or
not at all? But the Earth has changed so mightily,
right? Okay. I just wanted to check what you.
Well, the oceans have gone down at least 70 feet.
Graham Hancock is who I was thinking of.
Aha.
Apologies.
But because of this changes in the ocean levels, the oceans go down when the water is seized by ice. That's in an ice age. And then when the ice age ends, what's happening now is mild compared to what has happened in the past. In the past, before there were humans, all of the ice would melt, all of it. And the oceans would go up at least 77 feet. 77 feet is enough to drown every major city that's on a port in the world. Would this massive catastrophe of all the ices melting be caused by nature or caused by human beings? It's been caused over and over and over again by nature. What do we have? We have started these climate stabilization technologies, and with our attempt to control man-made greenhouse gases, we are on the lip of another massive climate stabilization technology. And we should go big time. And if we want to revert, we want to turn the climate back the way it was in 1650 or 1850, before the Industrial Revolution, fine. But we have to recognize that is not nature. We are not returning the earth to nature, not at all. That is an anthropogenic choice. That is a choice made by human beings. It is as arrogant as any other choice that humans have ever made. And frankly, nature favors the arrogant. Nature favors those who are willing to make large-scale change. And
so
now,
with that point, Howard, this just makes me think we people in our group, in our area, people would call us conspiracy theorists, but I think we're just open to ideas. That's what I think.
Right.
I think we're just open. So we hear about chemtrails, Britain spraying stuff in the air to cool, just to block out more sun. Bill Gates possibly putting up some kind of glitter or something to reflect some rays. What are your thoughts? Are you saying those are legitimate attempts to pressure evolution of the Earth to adapt to us then, or
Well,
what
they
is
scare
that?
me.
Is that kind of the jump?
Yes,
Or
because
I'm just
those are anthropogenic. Those are things humans want to do to make massive change.
right.
And it's sulfur dioxide that they've been contemplating spraying into the atmosphere in order to cool the Earth down, to reflect the sunlight that's coming
Right.
into the Earth and reduce the amount of sunlight coming in. That's crazy. First of all,
Okay, I just want to check what level of pressure do we want to put on the Earth till it goes, all right, I'm gonna quit for a second.
Well,
Until it recovers. You know
my
what I mean?
favorite climate stabilization technology is
Air conditioning.
well, no, yes, I love that. I couldn't function without that. But it's putting up giant solar farms in space, 5 feet by 5 feet in size. I mean, 5 miles, sorry, by 5 miles in size. And then beaming the power down to Earth in the form of microwaves. And that, look, the amount of solar energy in space is so close to infinite that it boggles the mind. And it leapfrogs.
And I can imagine the extra energy being outside of getting more of the ultraviolet radiation as well, right? The panels could collect probably more energy than within the atmosphere.
I think the current solar panels are collecting both visible light and ultraviolet. And but the point is that we could get rid of all of the use of fossil fuels for energy generation on planet Earth, thus bringing us to net zero. It's a human choice, but by all means, don't send gifts away. Don't send light away.
Right. Well, we're in Arizona, Howard. It's still not economically viable to do solar.
Well, that's
the next time I switch to tiles, the next time I switch my tiles, it makes sense to me to almost just have that as a backup, just for backup's sake,
Right. Well, it makes sense to have them as backup, but you know the problems. Roughly for 12 hours a day, there is no light.
Right.
We call that.
So the capacitance has to be good. The batteries have to be good. There's so many things.
Right. Exactly. And clouds. It's another small problem. There are no clouds in space. You can collect solar energy 24/7.
You know what the loss is zapping it here?
It's probably something like 40%.
Okay, but it's still well worth it because you're probably making 60% more. It's not like it's a net loss or anything.
No, you're adding, if you put enough of them up there, it would take time, but you could replace all of the energy generation, as I said, from fossil fuels, period.
One of my concerns for that would be space debris, because we did see a hailstorm destroy an entire solar farm. Have you considered? I know you're on these projects. Have you thought about how space debris would affect, or what part of orbit?
These things would have to be lifted above the space debris.
Okay.
Because the debris is accumulating in low Earth orbit,
and it's a lot. I don't know if everybody's ever looked on that space tracker, the debris tracker.
Oh,
it's one of the most amazing.
I forget the number of things that are up there. About 48,000 man-made objects of one kind or another. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
So yes, that's a problem. But look, nature says reperceive all of the problems in your environment. See a problem, reperceive it. That space debris, that stuff cost a fortune to get from Earth into space. Now collect it. Some of the wealthiest people I've known have owned junkyards. Collect that stuff and powder it and smelt it and use it in 3D printers. And you can make your second generation of space solar power farms in space from this debris without the cost of launching it to orbit. Although that cost is about to go down if Elon Musk can ever perfect his Starship, and he will perfect.
And I'm wondering, once we perfect some composites, you could almost have like a plastic solar screen that would be very pliable or something, and be more, less susceptible to those types of damages and stuff. I mean, we only make things better.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. New ideas are very hard to rewrite reality with. There are gazillions of ideas, and only a few take hold. And they take hold in part through these master visionaries like Elon Musk, who we all have permission to hate for everything he did with Doge. But on the other hand, I first spoke to him in 2005, 2005. And he's one of those few remarkable humans on Earth who's capable of sifting ideas, simplifying them, and then turning them and raising the money. In his case, he raises the money by making money off of his ideas and then plowing that money back into space. So even if NASA, assuming NASA will continue to exist, is going through a massive upheaval right now, but assuming NASA continues to exist, Elon's going to get us to Mars, not NASA. NASA does not have a viable program for Mars. Elon Musk does. Assuming
it does seem that private is the way to go in this case, and they've shown it viable considering the cost saving.
Yeah, but private means Elon Musk. He's a unique human
absolutely,
being.
Yeah.
Because Peter Beck, who owns Rocket Labs, he's put up about 68 rockets so far. Elon puts up 68 rockets in 6 months.
We just had a recent one. He just put up 4 astronauts, right? A couple days ago.
Yes, Elon just put up 4 astronauts who were on the space station, and the Russian module on the space station is leaking. So we have a problem.
I bet you Boeing built that one.
The Russians built it.
I know.
They could be even worse than Boeing. Yeah,
they use the hammer technique to fix things. I've seen it.
Right. So at any rate, re-perceive problems as possibilities. Use poisons as energy sources. Use them as sources of drugs that can change the quality of our lives. That's part of the theme of this book. That's the attitude of this book.
One more question on the nature side of things. People seem to have kind of a disconnect between maybe there's a line when it's organic, living creatures doing something, like eating and making waste, and that creates something. But then if you start introducing technology and machinery into it, people maybe that's the line where people perceive it as, it's something unnatural at that point. What do you think?
Except they're not understanding the nature right under their nose. Once upon a time, there were these, plants took to the land. And, if you've been the parent of a plant that wanted to take to the land, you would have said, listen, kid, everything green and good is down here in the sea. The sea gave you life. The sea feeds you. The sea shelters you. Up there, there's nothing but unending stone. By day, there's ultraviolet light, which will kill you. At night, there's darkness, which can kill you. And there's nothing to eat up there. But plants took to the land anyway, despite the sage advice of their environmentalist elders. And today, 3/4 of the life on the planet lives on the 30% of the earth that is land, on the small squidgen of stuff on the planet that is land. Move to live up to the land was a wise one. Then along came the ultimate rebels. Plants invented the ability to produce lignin and cellulose, building materials, and they used it to build stems. Up until then, moss were the highest plants. They were only 2 inches high, but compared to the size of a moss cell, 2 inches high is a space program. And what's worse, moss had the audacity to give a big to nature, to fling a finger in the face of nature.
Why we love you, Howard. It's why we love you.
By shooting their sperm 5 inches high, that's an even greater space program. That is an utter outrage against nature. But the plants started producing stems that allowed them to get higher than the moss. Getting higher than the moss meant that they could kidnap sunlight. They also invented leaves before the sunlight ever reached the ground. And then came these really big motherfucker rebels. And they took this lignin and cellulose thing, and they built themselves a sky penetrator, a real big screw you to nature. And they built
basically a canopy, basically.
Yeah,
right,
they built them. They built trunks 70 feet high, 170 feet high. They had 200,000 leaves per tree. They lifted 11,000 gallons of water a day up into the sky. That is really giving a screw you to Mother Nature. And today we call them trees. And their strategy was simple. Put up this giant trunk, get your leaves so high that you capture the sunlight before it ever reaches the ground. Now, there's a big deal. I make a big deal in this book about the importance of materialism, consumerism, waste, and vain display. And nature uses these things. These are nature's tools. She showed materialism when she started grabbing together gravity balls in the first 500,000 years after the Big Bang. A star is a massive, again, screw you, of a gravity ball. It is materialistic as all hell. And it dares to even destroy the material at its heart. And the screams of those dying atomic nuclei at its heart are what we call light. So, but when it came to the trees were doing materialism, waste, and vain display really big time. They were materialistic as hell, so materialistic that the most common biological material that we find, no matter where we dig in the earth, is tree trunks, going back 300,000 years. That's materialism. They were consumerist. 200,000 leaves per tree, that's as consumerist as hell. That's as gaudy as you can get. And they were wasteful. What did they do when the end of the summer came? Here they were adapting to these massive climate catastrophes, summer, winter, fall, and spring. And when the winter came, they dropped those leaves on the ground. Wasteful as all hell.
Not just that, they dropped them on all their enemies below, like on the moss and everything, and kept them from their sunlight.
Well, more important, those things they discarded, that waste, that garbage became a new feast for bacteria.
Right. It had like a dual purpose in that way, right?
Yeah, and the bacteria broke those leaves down to make a soil so much richer than any other soil that had existed before that it defies belief. And so the trees literally built the soil in which their soon-to-be enemies, flowering plants, would emerge. The story of the battle between trees and flowering plants, which involves materialism, consumerism, waste, and the invention of vain display by plants, because that's what a flower is, a vain display. We'll leave that for the book.
All right.
Well,
the book is
go ahead,
Sexual Cosmos. So where does sex come into this?
Oh, and let me show you the cover. You can see
there
that.
Yep.
Yes, beautiful.
So where does sex come in? There are two laws that science takes absolutely for granted. The first one is the second law of thermodynamics. All things are constantly falling apart, becoming useless, becoming disorderly, chaotic. And the second law is the law of least effort that says nature always takes the shortest path between 2 points. Well, if that's an accurate description of this cosmos, then how the fuck do you account for sex? Sex is so complex that even mega scholars cannot remember all the details. It is not the simplest path between 2 points. It is the most complicated path that nature has ever invented. And the fact that nature has invented it shows you that the law of least effort, this nature says screw you to the law of least effort. And,
right, but that's because we only improve with pressures. So we need to earn it.
Yeah, but
so when we earn it, we improve the species.
Right.
It can be a lot of effort.
Right. So basically, and vain display, look, land plants had a problem, especially when the trees came up. They were eliminated from vast areas of territory that the trees were hogging, and they needed a new place in which to thrive. So they tried to thrive on the riverbanks where the footing wasn't good enough for trees to stand up, and places like that. And to adapt to, look, adaptation means grabbing a hostile force and turning it into an opportunity. And that's what these plants were tending to do. And to do that, they had to become megasexual. What does that mean? They had to use sexuality for what sexuality is all about. Sexuality, for all of its infinite complexity, is about something very simple: turning out one of a kinds. When your dad and mom had you, you turned out to be so utterly unlike them that for years they wondered if it had been worthwhile to bring you into this world. Not only did you cry an awful lot when you were an infant, but the things you went through when you were a teenager made their hearts stop. You were not a carbon copy of them. Sex is not about reproduction. It's about taking a string of 8 billion atoms, a very meticulously wound string in which everything has to be in its proper place for the whole thing to function, and making a string that was unlike any string, this is the string of your genome, your genes, that had ever been seen before on this planet. In the hope, well, what is nature really in the business of? Nature lives within the envelope of what's possible. But nature is constantly poking fingers through that envelope and bringing new impossibilities into the realm of the real, into the realm of the ordinary, into the realm of the everyday. A tree was an impossibility. A leaf was an impossibility. When trees dared do their thing, they added to the vocabulary, to the toolkit of nature. So sex is really about producing enough of us oddballs, and we're all oddballs, that some of us manage to punch through that envelope of possibility and bring another little impossible thing into the realm of the ordinary, the everyday. Like Elon Musk is the greatest example right now, because he's making going to space ordinary in its own particular way. He has 3 launches a week at this point. He's going for 4 launches a week. He wants us to have regularly scheduled service to space the way the steamliners in the 1800s had regularly scheduled trips across the Atlantic. And he's getting there.
So what are your thoughts on the transhumanism part of that?
Well,
like the Neuralink and the other piece. I think, Jason, you referenced something about that, right? Possibly not.
No.
Okay.
Well,
okay. So I apologize. I didn't want to put your words in your mouth, but obviously Elon sounds amazing, and I think there's like 2 forces at play. One group is trying to reduce population as much as possible. One is more of a propagation of the species, and it seems to be these 2 things going at it. Both I find in oddly tyrannical, because I don't think you should force either side. I think you should let, to your point, nature kind of work itself out.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the transhumanism part of this?
Well, I was on the board of the whatever the Transhumanist Society is for a couple of years, but they've been captured by an idea that's made them stagnate, and that idea is Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity, that there will come a moment when all of our technologies change us utterly and change us physically, and we will not be the humans that we are today. Well, I tried to point out in a lecture that I gave via video, because I was in a bed when I gave the lecture. For 15 years, I was stuck in a bedroom. And I tried to point out that there have been thousands of singularities in the course of human life and in the course of evolution. Yeah. And those singularities in the human scale have not changed us at all. We still read Plato as if Plato's a companion, as if Plato is speaking to us as if he were, somebody in our social sphere. We read St. Augustine that way. Well, the world has changed. There have been so many singularities since the world of Plato that it's ridiculous. Plato was desperately afraid of a new technology. There was a new technology he was absolutely certain would destroy the Greek mind.
Yeah, it was social media, I think.
No, it wasn't quite social media. It was a precursor. So at any rate, up until then, you had been required, your education consisted of memorizing 2 books from the first word to the last period, although he didn't have periods at that point. Nonetheless, it was through memorizing those two books, the Odyssey and the Iliad, that Plato felt the Greek mind was formed. This new technology that kids were using threatened to end that totally. Why? It was the written word. Now, did the written word dumb down the Greek mind? No. 100 years later, there was a library in a Greek city in Egypt, Alexandria, and it nobody knows the exact number of books in it, but it appears to be around 10,000. So instead of knowing
burned,
two
right?
books, what's that?
Before it burned?
Before it was burned, yes. So that means that your possibilities had gone from only reading two books in your lifetime to having access to 10,000. Things were radical.
It's like literally taking a bite of the apple,
right?
In a weird existential way, right?
Right, and so that's just one of the technological changes.
Printing press, I would argue, would be a secondary part of that one.
Oh yeah, the printing press is very much a part of it. Reading glasses, those help too. The screens that we're looking with at each other on right now.
The Luddites with the sabotage, right, of the machinery. I mean, there's so many points.
Right. So basically, there have been thousands of singularities since Plato, and yet you can pick up Plato anytime you want and have what feels like a conversation with him. He feels like a modern human. He wasn't. But did any of that change us physically dramatically? None of it did. If the iPhone in 2007 wasn't going to change us physically, while in fact it changed our lives dramatically, then what is going to change us? So,
I guess we could also ask AI, right? But I let you finish your point. Would you mind expounding on possibly what might be that issue right now with AI after you finish your point, sir?
Well, I think we got to lay off of AI and stop trying to regulate it and stop being afraid of it. Look, even Elon Musk is afraid of AI. I think that's unwarranted. It's a waste of a lot of energy. Yes, we need to have warnings about things, but more important, we need to explore things. I
think the concern is not that it exists. I think it is that we're going to give it decision making pieces and tools for things outside that usurp the human decision making. I think that's the concern.
Well, that will happen.
People. I mean, how many videos have you seen now? You can't even prove are real or not now. You have to verify it 8 times, right?
Right. Well, it's going to get tricky. But then it got tricky when we invented the telephone. And how could you tell if that person on the other end of the line was really who it claimed to be? You didn't get to see him and check him out or her. That was 1876. It happened when we invented the typewriter. Oh my God, that's going to end cursive script. Cursive script is how we all learn to be human. Nope.
I can argue that writing has gone away. I can argue that people cannot handwrite anymore.
Yes, well, I have had trouble handwriting ever since I've second grade or first grade when they tried to teach it to me. So I welcome these keyboards, but I couldn't exist in the world without all of this machinery that we now have. So at any rate, so the transhumanists are, look, I had a transhumanist fan, very bright, came from Harvard. And he bought into the whole transhumanist thing, including the singularity. And Ray Kurzweil in the 1990s had said that the singularity was going to occur in the 1990s, and it didn't. Then Ray Kurzweil moved the figure out to an impossibly long time in the future, 2005. So my friend came in to see Ray Kurzweil talk because that was the year when he was sure he would be transformed by the singularity. Did it happen? Right. That's 20 years ago. Hey, where's the singularity?
He's the Greta Thunberg of the singularity, right?
Yeah. So Ray Kurzweil, who is apparently brilliant and invented OCR.
Well, it's 2045 now. They did push it.
They did push it. Amazing. So by fixating on the singularity, they fail to see the singularities that are happening in everyday life.
And it's also self-fulfilling prophecy, in my opinion.
How so?
We see writings in books that are prophetic, right? And then you're like, well, I see that they're prophetic, so I'm going to cause them to happen by seeing that they're prophetic.
Right. Well, fiction
actually becomes the problem.
Science fiction helps lays the path for real science. And that in another one of my books is called The Infrastructure of Fantasy. We have an infrastructure of habit, the stuff that carries us through everyday life, and an infrastructure of fantasy, the stuff that we think could be in the future. And some people are strong enough to make that infrastructure of fantasy into reality. Very few of them. I mean, in the space movement, Werner von Braun and Elon Musk, pretty much. Boeing, as you alluded to before, has basically shot itself in its feet.
They've spent all of their credibility, unfortunately. They really have.
Exactly. And you know, when the money was given out by NASA for private taxis to space, they called them way back then, it was given out to Boeing and to Elon Musk. And everybody knew Boeing was going to get there first because Boeing had been doing this for a long time. And
they just can't get them back, Howard.
Right. Well, so yeah, they just can't get them back. That's true. So
I can shoot anything into space, my friend.
Right.
I don't need to get it back. As long as I don't need to get it back, I'm good.
Right. So Elon was given less money than Boeing, and Boeing's taxi to space was a flop. And Elon's has gone to space roughly 48 times or something like that. It's gone up with humans roughly 8 times. So it's a regular transport service. And Boeing, you know, it's been shooting itself in the feet with its airplanes too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The quality control has been absolutely disgusting.
Right.
So welcome everyone. Another If by Whiskey. We've got Jason over here. We've got the great, tremendous Howard Bloom down here, down that way, right there. Okay. Do us a favor. Come over to Rumble. We've got a lot of people on Rumble today. It's beautiful. We've got 14 people on Rumble. We've got 22 on, I think it's on X right now. We've got a bunch on YouTube and everywhere else. Join us over on Rumble. We're going to ask questions for Howard. We got 30 minutes. Howard, so we have a little bit of a political thing. Now, it's not political. It's more like apolitical, to be honest.
Right.
But this is a beautiful thing. You are admitted, I would say, left-leaning person in your general ideology.
I'm radical, middle of the road. I'm radical.
Beautiful. You're extra medium. I love it. All right. Medium. So we talked about collaborations and things, and this is what's beautiful about it. I know your history a little bit, but my audience, and our audience and Jason's audience, do not know. Could you elaborate a little bit about your relation with like Newt Gingrich of all people and how you know him, and how this is part of what Jason and I talk about is we try to avoid idolizing people, but taking really good ideas. Right. And we try to avoid demonizing people, but taking their good ideas.
Right.
So in that vein, could you share a little bit about that relationship?
Well, you know, I've been into space since space is not a major focus in my books. It's there, but it's not a major focus. However, I got into space when I was 12 years old, and I had a little engineer's manual that told me the escape velocities to get to something that had never been done before, called orbit. This is I had pictures of the various sounding rockets, a big poster of the sounding rockets and how high each one had gone at White Sands testing range on my bedroom wall opposite a Van Gogh picture of the Starry Night. And so I have been into space for a long, long time. But in roughly the year 2000, I got a call from a former Air Force higher up, and who was in an advisory group to NASA. And he said, "You've got this chapter in your first book, The Lucifer Principle, and it's about how we need space as a backup, which is Elon Musk's concept, in case we fry ourselves with nuclear war. So that at least humanity has a second place in which to grow. And would you mind if I included it in an anthology?" Okay, I said he could include it in his anthology. Then he came back and said, "Well, would you become part of our space advisory group for NASA?" So I became part of his space advisory group for NASA. And a few years later, a NASA person, a National Science Foundation person, and a bunch of others tried to get me to go to a space conference. And they succeeded. It was a long story. I kicked and wailed every step of the way. I didn't want to go, but they got me there. And they promised to introduce me to everybody in the space community. And they did. They did. So I met some absolutely remarkable people. And I've been on the board of governors of the National Space Society ever since. I've run 3 space-oriented groups. One of them, and here's the point you were getting at about politics. One of the groups started, I guess, about 7 years ago. A friend of mine was retiring from the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel. And your retirement is like your graduation ceremony. It's a big deal because that's the first step of the next stage of your life. And so he invited me down to Montgomery Air Force Base to see him graduate. And I and about 4 other people from the space community went down to this meeting, to this whatever it is, celebration, I guess. And at some point, everybody was gathering in a conference room. And it was a conference room with the longest conference table I've ever seen, probably big enough for 30 to 40 people. And when I had a hard time finding this room, and when I finally found it, there was only one seat left at the table. And it was a seat at the very tail end, a power position. And I don't deserve power positions. So I tried to not sit there, and everybody shoved me into that seat. Said, no, it's yours. So I listened for an hour and a half to what they were all talking about. I didn't open my mouth at all. And then I said, look, if I understand correctly, you said the following, you said something else, you said this, and you said this. If we combine them all together, offering a $2 billion team prize to the team that can first get to the moon, because we have all the technology available off the shelf at this point. We had, for example, the Falcon Heavy, which could take humans to the moon. And they all said, oh, yes. And there was a general sitting at the table who ran the Air Force University in which this whole thing was taking place. And the general had started cultivating me about 4 years earlier, and sent one day I heard an email come in. I opened my phone while I was out walking through Prospect Park, and it was an email from the general saying, Howard, you are an extraordinary leader, or something like that, which practically made me drop to my knees. I mean, this guy knows leadership. He trains leaders. To call me an extraordinary leader, that's ridiculous.
People have it, Howard. We talked about it. Like Jason and I were talking about it because like we talk about it in the podcasting space alone. There are people that just have it. They just have it. There's a thing.
So I looked to pick up this project and run with it. The general tossed it back to me. And the general is basically, you're not allowed to have a political affiliation in the military, but in his heart of hearts, he's a Republican. And he's a person I love. He's a really terrific human being. So God knows how many months later, I got a call or I got an email from a friend saying, we're having a meeting with Newt Gingrich at 9:00 on Friday. Can you come? So I said, only if you bring the general, because I wanted him to pitch this project to Newt. And there was another boardroom scene. A whole mess of us was trying, you know that thing that happens when you're all trying to go through the door at once and nobody ever realizes that this is a human experience. It happens on a regular basis.
Yeah. People forget how to zipper.
So we were in the scrum going through the door, and I tried to position the general so he would be at the right hand of Newt Gingrich. So his left knee would be up against Newt Gingrich's right knee. And he outmaneuvered me. And he got me into that seat.
He outflanked you because he's a general.
Yes, exactly. So at any rate, so there I am, and they go around the table, and starting with the person on Newt's left, and they go all around the table, and everybody makes a little presentation. And they finally get to me. And I make my pitch for the $2 billion Moon Prize. Newt Gingrich is the strangest person I've ever interacted with. Now, remember, I've interacted with Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, the 11th president of India, Buzz Aldrin, all kinds of people. Nothing compares to Newt.
Yeah, you've not met any unique individuals ever at all up to this moment.
Right. And so Newt is the size of Jabba the Hutt. And he is
at this point. Remember, he lost some weight now, but he was definitely
before
whale,
Ozempic, right? So, but he sits there. They were carved in granite on Mount Rushmore. You cannot read his body language. His body does not move. And you cannot read his facial language. His face does not move. So I made my pitch and I failed. There was no response from Newt, the Man of Stone, at all. And it was hard for me to swallow. When I'm in a game, I like to win it. And it's hard for me to swallow it when I don't win it, when I lose it. But this time I had clearly lost. Well, 3 weeks later, I got a call from Newt Gingrich's office saying, Newt wants to run with your idea. So we ran with that idea together, and we got it in Time and Newsweek and Fox News and CNN and MSNBC and all of those outlets. So the point is that I don't care what your politics are. If we have a goal we want to achieve in common, let's focus solely on that goal, not discuss anything else, and move forward on it. So that's the basic mandate with which I work. And
that is such a good life lesson, though. Like, that is something we need to take away from that is we need to be goal oriented. We need to agree on a goal, and then all of us put all of our effort together to fix that goal, and then we can move on to something else too.
Yeah, I agree with you. We need to be future oriented. We need to know that we are nature's tools for inventing new futures or wrangling new futures into everyday existence. And that's what Newt and I were doing together. That's what the $2 billion Moon Prize group, which still exists, it contains. Okay, it has contained a former Democrat, Governor David Patterson of New York, who's a dear friend. So that gives
not
me
Governor Cuomo.
No, not Governor Cuomo.
I had to throw a little jab in there, throw a little current events in there, Howard.
Well, I voted for that man.
I understand. I mean, look, you guys are circling your wagons right now. I mean, you may want to talk about that. You live in New York City.
Right. So. I live in New York City, and this is a very dangerous time in New York City. But one way or the other. So in my group is also Robert Walker, who is the former head of the House Science Committee and who wrote the plank on space for Donald Trump's platform, for the Republican platform in the last election. And he is fucking brilliant, and I adore working with him. And he is a Republican, as Republican as can be, and he is in an almost Siamese twin partnership with Newt Gingrich. The two of them are partners. I love him anyway. And it's not anyway. I love him
because these are people, right? It's separate from the ideology. These are just good people,
right? And they're extraordinary people. They're not just good people; they're extraordinary people. There's a chance that one of the members of our group may become the next head of NASA. That's from rumor. I don't know if it's true. We shall see. So yes, I thoroughly endorse the Mark Pulse platform. Find the things you want to achieve in the future you think would better humanity. Find those who agree with you on that project. Fuck Democrat and Republican. Forget partisanship altogether and move forward. Move forward.
That's the best lesson I think we could ever share on this show.
And you will be doing nature's work.
Right.
Because nature's work is to poke through the envelope of possibility to the other side where things are impossible and wrangle impossible things into the realm of everyday reality.
It's beautiful. And thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. We are an hour in. I am not cutting this short in any way, but we probably have about 15 minutes before we wind it out because I've got a hard stop at the bottom of the hour. So Jason, if you have any other questions, or Howard, if you have anything else to share. Jason, you have any other questions before we bring it back to Howard?
No, I really like what you said. I'm really intrigued by the book so far. I love the way that you frame things and the way you just spell it out. It fits my brain, I guess. And I like this line I pulled out of there too. We need to see and value what we've achieved, And we need to defend the system that has given us these gifts. We need to realize that the Western system is not the worst system in the history of humankind. It is the best, and we need to defend its values. Human rights, freedom, I think, sorry, I cut off here, but you go on to say, I think, democracy and a few other things. So tell us about that, because a lot of people will point to that and say, the Western system, it's consumerist, it's taken, it's just wasteful. It makes these big inequalities between people. Why is it not the worst?
It's not the worst because it has more than doubled the human lifespan from 1850 to today in the era of modern industrialism. It has increased the wages of the poorest paid worker by a factor of 7. In other words, the poorest paid worker today earns what an entire tenement full of Irish dock workers earned in 1850. Well, let me try to remember this because this is a huge litany that comes from research from a previous book. But basically, it has made things better, and it has allowed us to have environmentalism. It has allowed us to critique materialism, consumerism, waste, and vain display, though we've got those things utterly and completely wrong, which you will see if you manage to finish reading the book. I mean, it's got them totally wrong. Look, we are being poisoned by the philosophy of a man who was gifted to us by the Western system. His father was an attorney in Germany, and his name was Karl Marx. And Karl Marx has taken the tools that the Western system has given us, a language and reason, and totally twisted them. And Karl Marx's big mistake is summarized in one thing he says. He says, if you go buy a 900-page book like War and Peace, all of the value in that book comes from the sweat labor that went into it. It comes from the people who chopped down the trees. It comes from the people who mashed the pulp into paper. It comes from the people who inked the printing presses. It comes from the sweat labor. What is missing in his evaluation of that 900 pages of paper pulp? What's missing is Tolstoy. What's missing is War and Peace. He fails to see the value of War and Peace itself, which is the whole purpose of the book. You would not buy 900 pages of paper pulp if they were blank.
How long would you say it took Tolstoy to write himself?
I have never checked into that, but look, it took me 14 years.
But just the labor, right? To your point, labor.
Yeah, it took me 14 years to do this book, and I'm sure it took Tolstoy 14 years or so to do War and Peace. It's monumental. Everybody knows. It's
interesting because Jason and I did a podcast on intellectual property as well, and when it is yours and when you really gift it to the world in a weird way,
Right. Well, it's a tricky proposition, but all the world around us is made of intellectual property. And if intellectual property is worth nothing, which is what Karl Marx said, just look at your iPhone. Is that worth nothing? Look at your laptop. Is that worth nothing? Look at the conversations you're able to have because you've got some equivalent of Zoom. Is that worth nothing? No, that's your life, buddy. Don't devalue your life. Fuck Marxism. Marxism tells you to devalue your life. And one of the major points of my book, The Genius of the Beast, a radical reinterpretation or radical reinvention of capitalism, which was originally called Reinventing Capitalism, Putting Soul in the Machine, is if you go to work, if you've got your very first job, and it's at McDonald's, and you go to work every day feeling that you're being exploited by the McDonald's Corporation, you're going to greet 300 people, 300 customers with a frown. And at the end of the day, you're going to go home and have emptiness. You will wonder why you went to that job at all, because it wringed your heart out. But if you go every day realizing you've just been given the opportunity not only to work, which kids without any training were not given before McDonald's came along, but the opportunity for 300 human interactions, and that gives you an opportunity to smile, a genuine smile, and try to
Meet
make
someone who gives you a new job.
yeah, but you want to just make the life of that person you're interacting with better in some way. And if you do that with 300 people, when you go home at night, you know the purpose of your work, you know the purpose of your life. You feel fulfilled. You have accomplished something. Marx cores the apple. He takes the very core out of the apple. It's like taking the sun out of the solar system. What would you get? Chaos. It's human ingenuity. This is why evolution tolerates us. This is why evolution has allowed us to grow to 8 billion humans on the face of the planet. The more humans, the more
And why it knocked us
creativity.
down to like 5,000 or less at one point.
Right. So we, by increasing the population, look, the population bomb was a very big book in 1968. It came from a person who I suspect had Marxist proclivities. He was a butterfly population researcher. And he predicted, remember, this is 1968. He predicted by the 1980s, there'd be so little room left. We'd have multiplied so much. There'd be so little room left that we'd have to sit on each other's shoulders. There simply wouldn't be enough food, and people would starve to death by the hundreds of millions all across the face of the planet.
How little they misunderstood urbanization.
Yeah.
They really misunderstood
No,
it.
they really misunderstood the world we live in. And look, the first two rules of science, as I learned them when I was 10 years old, were rule number one: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo, told the story wrong, but fine. Tell the story as if he'd been willing to go to the stake, which he wasn't, to defend his truth. But I needed the heroic version of the story. Rule number two: look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. And it gave the example of Anton von Leeuwenhoek, who invented a microscope, then put a drop of pond water under his microscope and saw that we had shared the world ever since we'd been around with a whole world of microscopic creatures too small to see. Now, what do the Marxists fail to do? They fail to adhere to rule number two: look at things right under your nose. They devalue the things right under their nose. They core the apple. They take the heart and soul out of everything they look at. They are mind destroyers. They are soul destroyers. And if they could get their hands on the system, they would destroy the very quality of life that we have come to enjoy, and which will
I
get
think
better.
our audience would agree 100% with that, Howard. So if we may, because we do have a little bit of time before we call it, this is Zach from our show. First of all, thank you for joining us, Howard. Thank you for everyone who joined us tonight. I hate that I cut this short because I'd love to have this conversation longer. But here's a good question from Zach about copyleft versus copyright. I guess open source versus, I guess, what Apple would do, right? Was full source. What are your thoughts on those two ideas?
You've got to give a profit to people and pay them for their work. If a person, even like me, is going to go through 14 years to bring you a book. Look, this is my 8th book. And I have 2 more books left to write, and I just turned 82 years old 2 days ago.
Congratulations. Happy birthday again.
Thank you. Now, I don't fuss with copyright. I mean, I get copyright on my books, but I'm not going to complain if somebody lifts a page out of one of my books, unless they claim they wrote it, in which case I will complain loudly. But people like me deserve to be paid for what they do. And they deserve the recognition that when you're paying them for what you think is a year's work, that's not a year's work. That's 14 years of work.
Yeah, that book didn't come out on a Tuesday. It didn't just like come out, he didn't produce it,
Right. And you need to encourage the creators. The creators are vital to nature because they add to the toolkit of the cosmos, the number of tricks this cosmos can pull off. And spirit in this cosmos is extraordinarily important. Spirit writes books. Spirit uplifts all of us. Look, I'm an atheist. I don't care. The human spirit is something vitally important. And the more humans, the more of that human spirit that there is.
That's a beautiful thing. So before we do call it a day, once again, Howard, it's been a blessing. I hope we get to do another one maybe towards the end, or maybe once I've listened or read the book.
That would be terrific.
We definitely would love to delve deeper into it. Jason, do you have a final question before we call it a night?
I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. Definitely, everyone watching, please check out the book. I'm a few chapters in, but it's already caught my attention. And not only am I excited to finish this one, but I want to go check out all your other books after that. So
that would be terrific. So
and once again, what I can attest to is you have a style of writing that is so easy to read. I can't explain it, but I'm sure that you hone it you spend so much time honing it. And I do, it's like whittling this beautiful carved out, thing. And I just want to thank you for what you brought to the cosmos and what you brought to the universe.
Thanks, Mark. Because I go over every paragraph 150 times.
Exactly. And I do it for every tweet. So I know exactly how you feel, like just the excruciating nature. So Howard, before we call it a night, please share all of your information. We're so grateful. AWOL Aaron, once again, thank you for joining us, sir. Great podcast. We've had some amazing podcasts, some amazing guests. Howard, you are certainly one of our greatest, no doubt, because I've vetted you for so many years now. So thank you so much. Please feel free to share all your information before we call it a night, sir.
Well, you can find out more about me and my books on howardbloom.net or Howard Bloom, all one word, BLOOM .institute. The Perfect. Howard Bloom Institute website.
Excellent. And I've worked a little ancillary with some of your people. You have just tremendous group of people that you work with that volunteer their time and everything to make your ideas even shine greater than they are.
And keep your eyes peeled, because on August 15th in Manhattan at the Chelsea Bar and Stage or something like that, I will be doing the first time an author has ever gone on stage having a dialogue, a conversation with his AI twin.
The gosh, August 15th. Please, Howard, please have your people send us that information. We would love to maybe watch that live or something, maybe report live on it as it's happening or something.
That would be terrific.
That would be so cool. Let's look at that.
Terrific.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Howard, thank you so much again. Jason, any final words before we call it, sir?
I'm good. Take care, everybody. Right. Happy Friday.
Well, yeah. So, a couple cleaning things. I'm about to head over to Are You Smarter Than a Politician? And I've already lost a few thousand points on Twitter today. I mean, on X or whatever. So I'm already a few thousand points behind. But on Monday, Jason, you and I are going to dissect a little more Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson.
Yes, sir.
We're just going to take a 20-30 minute chunk because it takes us 2 hours to go through 20 minutes. But we'll do that. And then we've got other stuff. So thank you so much, Howard. Jason, thank you. Thank you, everyone, as always. It's been another Knox Conscious. Oh, gosh, darn it. It's been an If by Whiskey, everybody.
Good.
I did a 3-hour yesterday. I apologize. My head's all over the place. I'm going to end this, Howard. Please stick around so we can say our goodbyes.
Okay.
Everybody else, thanks so much for joining us.
I've got my iron and my 6 string.